Welcome back, everybody, to episode 6 of That's DPI. I'm Zach, and that's Tyler over there. And we are going to get straight into day 2, or week 2, rather, of our draft coverage. And I'm going to pass it over to Tyler to introduce our first division and our first team.
Appreciate it, Zach. This week, we are going to cover the NFC South and the NFC West. Specifically, we're going to start with the NFC South with the New Orleans Saints. When I do my research for the draft, Mel Kiper is a big one that I look at. And I have never disagreed with Mel Kiper more than what he predicts the New Orleans Saints to do. Mel Kiper is predicting the New Orleans Saints to start at the number 9 overall pick with Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart. And I think that
That's how
pick
you think
is
about Jackson Dart.
That is exactly how I think about Jackson Dart at number 9 overall. It is way too early for him to go. He is going to be a day 2 pick. I think the Saints really need to go with offensive line. The guy that I like at number 9 overall for offensive line is the Missouri tackle Armand Membo. There are multiple experts that are predicting the Saints to snag a top-tier offensive lineman. I think he is one of the best offensive linemen in the draft. There's another offensive lineman I think is better than him, but I think he's going to go earlier, and I'll end up talking about him later. But I think the Saints are going to snag the tackle out of Missouri for this one. Zach, what do you think on this?
Yeah, I agree with you in the sense that Jackson Dart being mocked top 10 is abysmal. There are so many good players in this draft, and I actually am pretty high on Jackson Dart and his skill level. But top 10, my thoughts on this quarterback class are well known and well documented. I hate it, and I think it's one of the worst in years. And I think that some mock drafts that are being published here in this past week are showing Shedeur Sanders sliding into the 20s. And that's why I think a good thing. He belongs in the second round. And so him getting selected at 2 or 3 is absurd to me. And Jackson Dart, while talented, probably doesn't deserve to be a top 10 pick or even a first rounder. So I agree with completely throwing out whatever Mel Kiper says on the Saints number nine pick. But I think that the Saints have a massive need at defensive back, specifically corner. And I think they could pull the trigger on a guy like Will Johnson from Michigan. Really good, lengthy corner, 6'2". And he's not really like the 6'2" kind of man cover corner like a Terrion Arnold would be. He's more of like a patient, big, fluid, like instinctive zone corner who loves to jump balls. He's got great ball skills. He'll make some plays. And I think that when you get a guy like Will Johnson, it revamps an entire secondary. And I think that he deserves to be a top 10 pick. And I think that the Saints would be smart to address defense and kind of kick the quarterback can down the road, just because taking anybody in this draft, unless you trade up, is a mistake. And even if you do trade up, I think that's a mistake. But another option I do think is Will Campbell, who I believe is the offensive lineman you're going to talk about later, being better than Armand Membu. I think that there's no team that really has a need besides maybe New England to take Will Campbell. And I don't think New England's going to take Will Campbell. So I think that if he falls to 9, the Saints should pick him up and protect whatever future quarterback they end up drafting. Maybe it's somebody in the later rounds, kind of like a Russell Wilson situation. Like Russell Wilson was a 3rd rounder, 4th rounder. So they could end up doing something like that. I know they have Spencer Rattler. So, but yeah, we generally agree. We just disagree on what player and maybe Will Campbell. I mean, Will Johnson, I'm sorry, could go at 9 here.
I agree. Will Campbell, the offensive lineman, is absolutely who I was going to say is better than Membu. I think he will go earlier than 9. I think Will Johnson, I don't think he's going to end up being top 10, but I think he's going to be darn close. He's another guy that I'm going to end up talking about later on. Going to the Saints' arch rival now, we have the Atlanta Falcons. I was talking to a Falcons fan earlier, and he said that defense is the need that they have to get. But knowing the Falcons, he would not be surprised if they draft a wide receiver. A quote, he said, "Don't be surprised if I'm wearing a Luther Burden jersey next year." It's unoptimistic thinking, but I think I give the Falcons a little bit more hope than that. I do personally think they're going to end up drafting a defensive player. I think an edge rusher is the Falcons' biggest need, but I think so many edge rushers are going to go before we get to the Falcons at pick 15. My go-to for this is Will Johnson. I said that I don't think he's going to be a top 10 pick, but I do think he's going to be close. And I think 15 is where he's going to end up falling. I think it's a perfect fit for Atlanta if he does fall that far. And the reason I think he'll fall that far is because I think that the top 10 is going to be stacked with some edge rushers.
In Tyler, what you just said, I agree with entirely. And my breakdown is actually very similar. I think that the edge rushers, once you get past the 10th pick in the draft, the edge rushers get a little bit questionable because you have these guys that are clearly talented, but they have some serious gaps and some serious concerns in their game. Like when you look at Shamar Stewart, for example, the guy is a stud. Measurables, he's everything you could ever ask for in an edge rusher. But he had 1.5 sacks last season. How can you justify drafting a top 15 pick edge rusher with so little production in college and expect him to produce at a higher level in the NFL? I think that a guy like that should fall. James Pierce Jr., edge rusher out of Tennessee, has a lot of character concerns that could cause him to fall. Same with Mike Green, although I think Mike Green is the most talented of those three. He does have some cases of sexual assault that kind of hamper his record and caused him to transfer to Marshall in the first place. So there's a lot of these edge rushers that it's kind of like playing Russian roulette a little bit. You don't know which of these guys is going to pan out. And so you picking Will Johnson, you going the cornerback route, I think is a safer choice than going one of these middle tier edge rushers. And I agree. And I think the Falcons will make a safer choice and go with an interior guy like Kenneth Grant, a defensive interior guy, defensive tackle, 330 pounds. He's pretty shifty. He can move despite being that weight. And I think at 15, bolstering that interior is the first step in getting edge pressure. So I think the Falcons could address edge later in the draft, maybe get somebody more developmental, but maybe better value later in the draft. And instead going with one of these surefire interior guys like Kenneth Grant.
I don't hate the Kenneth Grant pick. Kenneth Grant is currently number 17 on Pro Football Focus's big board, 6'3", 339 pounds. He would be a great pick for Atlanta, 100%. I think any good defensive player would be a smart pick for Atlanta. To entertain the Falcons fans' pessimism, is there a chance they draft wide receiver here?
Not a chance, especially not Luther Burden. Luther Burden is currently being mocked as a late first round, early second round guy. I would be shocked if they pulled the trigger on a guy like Burden when they have so many pertinent needs on the defensive side. I mean, they lost some key veterans on the defensive line that need to be addressed in the first 2 rounds. So if you're going to not waste a pick, but spend such significant draft capital on an offensive skill player when you have Kyle Pitts, when you have Drake London, when you have Bijan Robinson, if you're going to spend another first rounder, when they spent a first rounder on a quarterback last year, how are you going to help that defense? You can't keep investing first rounders into the offense and expect that defense to get better and expect to get into the playoffs. So I think that there's no chance they go Luther Burden. Maybe if a guy like Tet McMillan falls, they could take it from Arizona, the 6'4" X wide receiver. They could take a chance on him, but I don't think he falls. And I think they instead go with another safe pick in Kenneth Grant.
I agree that McMillan's not falling to 15. He is ranked number 3 on Pro Football Focus's big board. That I do agree with you that there's not a realistic shot that they take a wide receiver, but it would be very Falcons-esque.
Yeah, and I was shocked when they took Bijan at 8 2 drafts ago.
And Penix last year.
And Penix. So you're right. It would fit with the trend. And I'm going to talk about trends a little bit later because I have something fun cooking up for one of these later teams. But yes, it would fit with the trend. But I would be shocked if it was Burden, if that makes sense. There's Golden from Texas, who I think would be a much better selection if they're going to go skill player. And I also think that Burden is good, but I don't think that he's going to fit with the Falcons. I'm also selfishly hoping that he could fall to Detroit. But regardless of that fact, I don't think he'll be at the selection at 15. But moving
What
on
are your
to
thoughts
go
in
ahead.
Carolina? I
Yeah,
think you were
moving
about
on to
to segue that
Carolina.
as well. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I also here's another place where I mentioned Ted McMillan from Arizona. Panthers pick at 8. I think that there's a lot of chances that some other players maybe move up the draft board and Ted McMillan could slip out of that top 5. But definitely not out of the top 10, because if he's there at the Panthers pick at 8, he's gone, as far as I'm concerned. Xavier Legette for the Panthers was disappointing. And I believe that the Panthers could take a chance on another offensive playmaker. Maybe it's Ted McMillan. Maybe it's the tight end Warren out of Penn State. Somebody that I said the Cowboys have a chance of taking, but the Panthers could too. They just need some firepower. But I do think that, once again, this is where one of those high dollar edge rushers goes. Top 10 pick. Panthers' biggest need is edge. I think that it's Jalen Walker. He's a local kid. I think he's extremely versatile, and he's going to bolster a defense that really struggled to get to the quarterback last season. So that's my selection. Jalen Walker out of Georgia.
I actually have Jalen Walker as well. There's another name that I also have. I think there are two guys of that position that could go to Carolina. And it is, of course, Jalen Walker, but it's also Jihad Campbell from Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Pro Football Focus is another one that I really look at just to see where are they being ranked, how good are these players when you look at the statistics. So Campbell is at 10 on the big boards for Pro Football Focus, while Walker is at 28. So I think Campbell could definitely be a better player, but most of the experts are picking Jalen Walker to go, and they're picking Campbell to be later in the draft. And I was looking at it and I was like, why is that the case? And what I found through my research is that Campbell appears to be more of a Mike and a Sam linebacker, while Jalen Walker tends to be someone that is fresh off the ball. He's stacking the box. He seems to be a lot more elusive. So if I'm a Panthers fan, I'm okay with either of those guys, but those are definitely the two rushers and linebackers that I'm looking at is Jalen Walker and Jihad Campbell from Alabama.
Here's my opinions on that. I love Jihad Campbell. I feel the same about Jihad Campbell as I do Malachi Starks, the safety that we discussed in last episode.
Mm-hmm.
I think, honestly, though, I think that Jihad Campbell has done himself more favors in the combine than Starks did. Starks' athleticism kind of took a step back in the combine, and that's why he's sliding out of the top 10, whereas Jihad Campbell took a step forward. His combine was incredible. He showed off ridiculous straight line speed and agility. His RAS score, raw athleticism score, was well into the 9.8s, 9.9s. So I think that it would be a really solid pick for the Panthers, just not at 8. I think that the Panthers could get Jihad Campbell into the middle of the teens there. So if you trade back 5 or 6 selections and get Jihad Campbell and get some more selections, so you could potentially grab an edge rusher that falls outside of the first round, or maybe a wide receiver like Luther Burden or somebody who's going to make some plays. I mean, but I think that the Panthers were the 32nd ranked defense in terms of points allowed and in terms of Pro Football Focus grade. They need to address defense, and whether that's at Mike linebacker or whether that's at edge rusher, I don't know yet, but I think that Jihad Campbell at 8 would be a little bit of a reach.
I agree, and the experts agree with you as well. But as you've pointed out, his combine is making Campbell go higher up on draft boards. You mentioned his athleticism score. It's going up. I wouldn't be surprised if a team does reach with those numbers. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Panthers are the team to make that reach.
Gotcha. And it wouldn't be this first time a linebacker with the last name Campbell, who was off ball, was selected in the first round. Jack Campbell of the Lions was a surprising, shocking pick that threw the traditional positional value draft strategy out the window. And Jack Campbell has panned out. He was the only healthy linebacker on the Lions last year and played really well. And I think Jihad Campbell has the chance to be even better than him. So mocking him at 8, I don't think is asinine. I do think it's unlikely. But I really like him as a prospect. So I wouldn't even hate the selection for Carolina. I just think maybe if you move back a couple of spots, he'd still be there and you can grab a pick or two in the later rounds in day 3. But I agree. Jihad Campbell would be a great fit for Carolina. But moving on to, go ahead.
Is there a chance that both of them fall? Because you mentioned the other possibility of them if McMillan falls to Carolina. So all of a sudden, Carolina picks them. Is there a chance that one of those linebackers falls out of the first round simply for the fact that Carolina didn't pick a linebacker, therefore someone else picks one of those guys later, and then the other one falls out?
Absolutely. I feel like once this draft gets past pick 5, every single mock draft is going to be out the window. This is one of the drafts where I think it's the hardest to predict because number one, every single team has their first round pick still. I don't think that this has ever been the case. The last time that we've gotten this close to the NFL draft with every team having their first round pick still was in 1991. And right before that draft, Kansas City traded that first round pick to the 49ers to get Joe Montana. And so they still didn't end that draft with their first round pick. So we right now can mock a player to every team. And I think that has an interesting dynamic to this draft. Additionally, there's a lot of first round grades. I think I have 20 first round grades here, meaning that there's going to be some guys worth trading up for. Some teams going to want to trade back to get away from that, grabbing a second round grade player in the first round over drafting potentially. So yeah, I think that, and for context, Jihad Campbell is one of those guys I do have a first round grade on. So if he falls out into the top 10, outside the top 10, I think that he's going to go pretty quickly. There's some teams there that need a linebacker, notably Dallas and Miami.
I'll let you segue us back to Tampa Bay now. I want to get your thoughts on what is happening down in the Buccaneer territory.
Yeah, final team of the vaunted NFC South, everyone's favorite overperforming division. I think Tampa Bay has a lot of needs on the defensive side. A lot of those being mocked as edge rushers. But I think that the safety beside Antoine Winfield Jr. has been a weakness. They haven't quite figured it out there in Tampa. And so at pick 19, this is where I think Malachi Starks could go. I talked about him earlier. I talked about him in the last episode. We both talked about how much we like him as a prospect. I think that Tampa Bay will go BPA and will go Malachi Starks here. It's perfect. Todd Bowles loves this guy. I can just see the vision in my head. Pairing him with Antoine Winfield allows Winfield to roam everywhere he wants to, make plays. And I think his measurables line up well to almost like a Kirby Joseph, Brian Branch situation. It's perfect. If they don't go Malachi Starks and Jihad Campbell falls here, it's a no-brainer. They're selecting Jihad Campbell. I just don't think he'll be there. But this is a guy that's widely being talked about as someone Tampa Bay will go after. So those are the two players that I would keep your eyes on if you live in Tampa Bay. It's Malachi Starks and Jihad Campbell.
Zach, I think you made a mistake in that one. I think you read my notes when you talked about that because that's almost exactly what I have. I have Jihad Campbell and Malachi Starks both mentioned in my notes. The funny thing is when I talked about Carolina, I talked about multiple picks picking Jalen Walker. Those same mock drafts have Tampa picking Jihad Campbell out of Alabama. I absolutely agree with you that Malachi Starks is definitely their first priority. If he's not there, which I agree, I don't think he'll be there. I'm looking at the draft order right now, and he's such a good player that I don't think he's going to stick around to 19. But there's only a couple teams ahead of him that need a safety, and if they choose to opt out of safety, there is a very real possibility that Malachi Starks falls to 19 and goes to Tampa Bay. If we are correct and that doesn't happen, and he doesn't fall to 19, yeah, that Alabama linebacker is definitely up for grabs in Tampa Bay. If the Buccaneers are set on safety and Malachi Starks isn't there, this is where they could reach on Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame. I would be shocked if that does happen, but there is that chance. I think Starks, Watts, and Campbell are all at play for Tampa Bay right now.
Yeah, and I really like the way that Xavier Watts plays football. I just don't think that he's quite justifiable as a top 20 pick, if that makes sense.
He's definitely not. Pro Football Focus has him ranked at 40, if I'm not mistaken, on their big
Yeah,
board. So he's definitely not a top end pick, but I do think he's the second best safety in this draft. So if
I
the Bucks
agree.
are
Yeah.
set on safety, this is where who cares about grades? If you need a safety and he's the best safety on the board, Watts might end up as a first round pick.
Yeah, and both of the guys that we talked about, Campbell and Starks, have both been mocked many times going ahead. I mean, we've talked about Campbell being mocked going top 10, and we've talked about Starks being a borderline top 10 player. So it's very possible that both of them go, and Tampa Bay reaches on a guy like Watts, because I know they're desperate for that safety duo that can roam the field and allow their pass rush to get home. So I agree with you. I did not make a mistake. I did read my notes, but we did have very, very similar outlooks here for this Tampa Bay team, which makes me feel better, because I wasn't super confident about my analysis with them. But agreeing with you does make me feel a little bit better about my analysis. So we can move on to our next division and talk about the San Francisco 49ers, a team that's in
It's
rough
your
shape.
favorite team, Zach.
Don't say that. I was almost gonna make that joke, but I've made a joke about disliking many teams to this point. But San Francisco may top that list for non-divisional opponents. But they're in some trouble. They're not doing well, and I smile slightly as saying this. They're losing a lot of key guys. And maybe with Brandon Ayuk unhappy, the bleeding isn't over for San Francisco. So maybe my entertainment, my hate watch can continue. But I'm curious on your thoughts. Where do you think that San Francisco is going to go at pick 11?
So I think they're going to go offensive tackle one way or the other. Mel Kiper has Armand Membu going at 11. I've got him going at 9 to New Orleans. So Membu is no longer available in mine. I think whether it's offense or defense, the biggest need in San Fran is absolutely going to be their line. If I am John Lynch and Membu is off the board, I'm taking Will Campbell. I think Will Campbell from LSU is a great pick if New England doesn't take him. I can see New England not taking him. I don't know if New England is going to make that obvious pick. So if Will Campbell's available, Pro Football Focus puts him at number 6 on their big board. But because most experts are predicting him to go after Membu, I am also going to do that. And I think he's going to go to San Francisco. I think he's going to be a very big mirror image to what Trent Williams is.
Gotcha. Uh,
Statement exercise.
yeah, and Trent Williams, obviously the anchor to that left side of the line there. And I think it would be smart, considering they're about to pay a mid quarterback $60 million. Might as well protect him, right? Putting so much investment into him. So Membu makes sense. He's definitely the best pure pass protecting tackle in the draft. Will Campbell is phenomenal, but I do think Membu is better at the pass sets, despite being a little bit undersized. So I agree. I actually do mention tackle here in my mock draft, and I actually mentioned Armand Membu. But I don't think that they're going to go offense here. I think that the line is something they will still focus on, but I don't think that it will be offensive line. The San Francisco 49ers have one interior defensive lineman that had above a 50 Pro Football Focus grade on their roster currently. One. And it's Evan Anderson, and he was a 60. So their
That's actually not who I would have expected it to be.
Interior O-line. Well, who'd you expect?
I missed the word interior, so that's
interior. Yeah. Of course, they have a top 5 edge rusher in Nick Bosa, but outside of him, interior edge rusher, interior defensive linemen, they're one of the worst units in football after they've lost some of the guys that played on that unit this past season. So I think they have to address that one way or the other. Either they're addressing that or edge, because the edge opposite of Nick Bosa is either two guys who played so few snaps they don't have a grade, or Taron Jackson or Yetur Gross-Matos, who are both sub 52 PFF grade players. Just very poor guys, honestly. You need somebody else on that edge. You can't count on Nick Bosa to get all your sacks. So I see Shamar Stewart here. Firstly, because Shamar Stewart is an edge rusher who I think fits the scheme really well. He's a really powerful, pocket-crushing edge rusher that will help get Nick Bosa more sacks. That's who the Niners need. They don't need someone with a ton of production, because I talked about Shamar Stewart being a guy who only had a sack and a half in college. So he's not going to get sacks. He's going to produce sacks by pushing the quarterback into Nick Bosa, who's going to clean up the play. And the second reason I have Shamar Stewart going here is because the San Francisco 49ers suck at drafting in the first round, and I don't think that Shamar Stewart is going to be that good. And so I think he's a player that's perfectly mocked to San Fran, as they have had some really, really bad luck drafting in the first round. Not necessarily bad luck, just bad drafting decisions overall in that unit. That's something that this organization has done very poorly over the last couple of years. I mean, it's really been Nick Bosa, and that's it to earn a second contract. Maybe there's one other guy.
Yeah, I like Shamar Stewart with the scheme. I don't like him at pick 11. I don't think he is a top 15 pick. I think he can definitely be a first-round pick, and it's a steal if he falls to the second round. But I don't like him at pick 11. I think that would be a massive reach by the 49ers.
Gotcha. But here's my one argument. Think of their last couple of first-round picks. 2021 first-round pick, Trey Lance, not with the team anymore. 2020 first-round pick, Javon Kinlaw, defensive tackle. He's not on the team anymore, I don't think. I imagine, he's with the Commanders now, so not even on the team anymore. And then the other one's Brandon Ayuk, who may be traded. Mike McGlinchey, their pick in 2018, is off with Denver now. Reuben Foster is out of the league. Solomon Thomas is not with the team anymore. Nick Bosa is obviously a stud, but they cannot figure out the first round of the draft. And so that's why I'm mocking them, Stewart, because I think that this organization is incompetent when it comes to evaluating first-round talent.
So are you saying that they're incompetent at evaluating first-round talent, which is why they'll reach for Stewart?
Yes.
Okay.
And I generally agree with your analysis that Stewart should not go in the top 15, but he will because San Francisco picks in the top 15. That's my argument.
Gotcha. Okay. I do understand that argument then.
You just have more confidence in the Niners organization than I do. I have zero confidence in them. I think that they've made really horrible decisions, and one Mr. Irrelevant pick is ironically keeping them relevant and keeping them from being fired. Because if they miss on Brock Purdy, Trey Lance doesn't pan out, and they are out of a job. So they have been horrible at drafting in the first round. They can prove me wrong, but I don't think they will, and I think in turn we'll draft Shamar Stewart.
I think that's why they have to make a safe pick. Because you're right. They have not been well in the first round, and I think they need to do a safe pick. We'll find out what happens on April 24th, but I do want to shift to the next team on our list, and that is one of the, before this year, the only other active team, or the only other team with an active quarterback to win a Super Bowl, and that is the Rams. Other than I butchered that. It's the LA Rams that we're going to talk about next. Zach, save my stumbling there. All right, what's going down in LA?
So the Rams have two options here at pick 26. They did really well last year. They have two options. They have to take an absolute slam dunk playmaker to give Matthew Stafford just an abundance of options for what may be his final season as a Ram and make a Super Bowl push in his final year, or they can address a glaring weakness on the defensive side. Those are their two options, in my opinion. And here's why I think they're going to go with the first one. This is my trends question I mentioned earlier. Sean McVay, in his time as the Rams head coach and as well as the GM in LA, I don't know his name, has selected 3 times the amount of offensive players in the first round than defensive players. He's only selected 2 defensive players in the first round in his time in LA. And I don't think that he's going to buck that trend. I think that he's going to go with Colston Loveland, the tight end, here to give Matt Stafford a weapon, because Higbee has not been a very explosive playmaker. He's a great possession tight end, but Loveland is a guy that can really make a difference and stretch the field alongside Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua. And I think that's the option they will go with, simply because the first round is where the Rams have invested the majority of their offensive talent. I think that they're great at finding late round defensive guys. I think they will continue to do that. They bucked the trend last year by selecting Jared Verse. He's a defensive rookie of the year, so it made sense. Plus, there was a crazy run on offensive players ahead of the Rams pick. I think Verse was the first defensive player chosen in that draft, and he ended up being the defensive rookie of the year. So that's why they bucked the trend. They will not buck the trend this year. They will instead select a tight end in Colston Loveland or potentially another offensive weapon. But if they do select defense, I did identify 2 corners that fit really well in their scheme. Hairston out of Kentucky, who we've talked about, and then Isaiah Thomas out of Florida State. Corners are most glaring weakness, so they can address that with those 2 picks.
I like that you're talking about tight end, because we really haven't talked about tight end. I think the tight ends in this draft are going to be very underrated. I think there's going to be a tight end or 2 that gets drafted late first round and does very well. I agree with you that I think the Rams are going to go offensive weapon. If this guy is here, I think it's a no-brainer that you have to pick him. And that name is, I'm going to butcher it. It's Emeka Egbuka. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, from Ohio State.
From Ohio State. I hope I pronounced that right. I think if he is there when the Rams are on the clock at pick 18, I think that's got to be the guy that you take. They brought in Cooper Kupp from LA, but losing DK Metcalf.
Hold on, we're talking about the
I'm
Rams here.
Wrong notes. Jeez, oh man, this is bad. I have butchered so much. I am looking at the wrong notes. I do believe that the Rams could bring him in. I know that they brought in Devontae Adams.
There you go.
To LA. I'm looking at the wrong notes. I apologize to the Rams fans here. I know they brought in Devontae Adams, but I do think that Ohio State wide receiver is going to be the best bet if he is available at that point in time.
Yeah, I can see that. Egbuka is a very talented player, and if there's anybody in the NFL that can find a way to get him the ball, it's Matt Stafford. But I think that tight end's a bigger need than wide receiver. Why pay Devontae Adams so much money just to go out and draft another one? So I think that tight end could be addressed here for the Rams. Give them, because they already have Kyron Williams. He's like the missing piece to that offense, the missing explosive piece to help Matt Stafford and the Rams push for one final Super Bowl. But moving on to Seattle, the Seahawks. I think that there's a lot of ways they could go here, and I want to let you start off first since you already partially read these notes.
So
go ahead and finish it.
There's a lot of different things that they can do. My pick for Seattle is going to be a corner from Ole Miss, Trey Amos. I like what he can do. I think there is a chance that they can go corner with Maxwell Hairston as well. I think going corner could very much be a reach, but with corner being one of the needs in Seattle, I see some mock drafts taking corner. I've seen a few mock drafts of him taking Trey Amos. I've seen a few mock drafts of them taking Maxwell Hairston. I like the Ole Miss cornerback better.
And I don't hate that. I do think that they could address corner, given that Job has no, that's the Rams. Given that,
see, now you're mixing it up.
I know you've got me screwed up. But given that the Seattle defense needs some help, however, if it had not been for the beautiful Chicago Bears and everything they stand for, people would be panicking in Seattle more about the offensive line, because Geno Smith took nearly 50 sacks last year. And that's not, when you bring in a guy like Sam Darnold, who needs a clean pocket to produce at any semblance of the level he produced this past season, you have to address the offensive line in the first round. You cannot wait on it. You can't kick the can down the road. You need to give Darnold time. And their interior is one of the worst in football. And so I think there are two players that could really help the Seattle Seahawks out in that spot. First being Tyler Booker from Alabama. He's an offensive guard. He is someone that I mocked to the Lions in our first episode. He's someone I really, really like, and I don't think it would be a reach at all to take him in the top 20. I think he's the best interior guard in the draft, and he would really seal up a huge need for Seattle and allow their quarterback, Sam Darnold, to thrive. However, if they don't go Tyler Booker, I think that Kelvin Banks Jr. also could be the selection because of his versatility. If he's still there, I don't think they pass on him because he can play both tackle and guard, and both tackle and guard is a need for Seattle. So they can plug him in wherever their weakest position is, whether that's tackle or right guard or whatever, and he can come in and produce. So Banks and Booker are two names that if I were a Seattle fan, I would be on the lookout for.
I think Booker's going to be the best bet in Seattle because they've got the 18th pick. It is the Cardinals who have the 16th pick. And this gets to my most confident pick of the night. I think the Arizona Cardinals are going to draft Kelvin Banks Jr. I don't think he's going to be there for Seattle. I'm excited for the Arizona Cardinals. I interact with Cardinals fans. I weirdly interact with Cardinals fans more than you would think. I love their stadium. I went to a game a few years ago. I joined a Facebook group of Cardinals fans, and I've stayed in it. And so I'm weirdly up to date with what Cardinals fans are thinking. And a lot of them are wanting Kelvin Banks Jr., and a lot of them are predicting Kelvin Banks Jr. The Cardinals had a horrific offensive line last year. Pro Football Focus ranked them 26th in the NFL, despite having a first-round offensive line tackle already on their roster. They did not mesh well at all. They did not protect their quarterback, and I think Kelvin Banks Jr. is going to be. It's not going to bring the Cardinals to a top 10 offensive line, but it's definitely going to be a big piece in improving their offensive line.
Yeah, and especially the fact that they just lost interior guy Will Hernandez to free agency. He's still a free agent. They haven't brought him back. I don't think they intend to bring him back. So I'm actually going to take my notes and completely throw them out because I agree with everything you just said. I think that I'm convinced Kelvin Banks is going to the Cardinals. I'm gonna buy the jersey. But if they don't, they could go Jahdae Barron, the corner from Texas. I think it's weird mocking these corners and these edges because some of these guys could go anywhere from pick 8 to pick 48. I have no idea where half of these corners are going to go. And Jahdae Barron is one of those guys. I think he could be a real stud, but like what happened last year, Terrion Arnold fell out of the top 20, and he was a top 10 pick going into draft night. I have no idea where these corners are going to go. So I think it's much more safe for them to select an offensive lineman because they already have quarterback sealed up. They need to protect Kyler, and they have a glaring hole at guard that Banks would fill very nicely.
I agree. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I think that is all the time that we have for today. The draft is Thursday, April 24th. Join us on Wednesday night, April 23rd, for our live mock drafts. We're going to be mock drafting the entire first round, along with the full 7 rounds of our favorite teams, the Chiefs and the Lions. Join us next week on That's DPI when we go to the northeastern part of the country and tackle the AFC East and the AFC North.
See you next week. Thank you guys for watching.